The vote was not close. 19 species raised their marks in favor of the resolution. Humanity's single delegate, a tired man named Roe with gray at his temples and ink stains on his fingers, watched the tally board shift from white to red. He did not flinch. He did not speak. He simply folded his hands on the table and waited for the session to end. The Galactic Compact's Grand Forum sat inside a hollow moon that had been carved out, polished, and lit up centuries before humans had learned to split the atom. The ceiling was 3 kilometers above the floor. The acoustics were designed so that every voice carried equally regardless of species or size. It was meant to feel fair. It did not. High Arbiter Soval of the Vithrani stood at the central podium. His species was tall, thin, and silver-skinned, and they had been members of the Compact for 4,000 years. When he spoke, the translation rings hummed softly in every delegate's ear. "The resolution passes," he said. "Humanity will have 30 galactic days to present a military asset of meaningful standing before this body. Failure to do so will result in the reassignment of 3 border systems currently held under human territorial claim." A low murmur moved through the forum, not outrage, something closer to entertainment. At the far end of the great curved table, the Grand Delegate, a wide, armored creature named Aurak who commanded more warships than most nations' own cities, leaned over to his aide and said something. The aide laughed. The translation ring in Roe's ear caught the tail end of it. 30 days is generous. They could have 30 years. Roe looked down at his hands. The holographic display at the center of the forum was still showing humanity's registered fleet, 14 ships. The Compact's assessment software had already labeled each one with its estimated combat rating. Every number was low. The smallest Gren patrol cruiser outgunned 3 of them put together. The hull designs were boxy, unpolished, and dull gray. No iridescent plating. No visible energy arrays. No gravity bend drives trailing light behind them like fins. One of the Lushan delegates, a species that resembled tall blue herons with 4 arms, had actually walked up to the display during the session and pointed at one of the human ships the way a person points at something they cannot quite believe is real. "This is a warship?" she had asked, to no one in particular. More laughter. Roe had not looked up then either. After the session ended, the forum emptied slowly. Delegates moved in clusters, talking, already thinking about the next item on the agenda. Humanity's territorial strip was a small matter, a formality. Everyone expected the border systems to change hands quietly in 30 days, and that would be that. Roe was almost to the exit corridor when a voice stopped him. "Admiral." He turned. Ambassador Tyrell of the Lushan delegation stood a few meters back. He was older than the delegate who had mocked the display, and his eyes carried a different quality, not cruelty, but something careful and watchful. "I want to be honest with you," Tyrell said, speaking low. "They have already drawn the maps. The reassignment documents were drafted before this session began. They do not expect you to produce anything." Roe looked at him for a moment. "I know," he said. Tyrell tilted his head slightly. "Then you understand the situation is serious." "I understand it completely," Roe said. There was a pause. Tyrell studied the human's face, the calm of it, the strange stillness that did not look like defeat or denial. It looked like something else. He could not name it. "What will you do?" Tyrell asked. Roe picked up his document case from the side table by the door. "The demonstration has already been scheduled," he said. "We submitted the request to the forum office this morning. 14 days from now. Verath system, open engagement zone." Tyrell blinked. "You scheduled it before the vote." "We scheduled it 3 weeks ago," Roe said. He nodded once politely and walked out into the corridor. Tyrell stood in the emptying forum for a long moment, watching the door. Around him, the lights of the great carved moon hummed quietly. The holographic display had switched off. The image of humanity's 14 dull gray ships was gone. He thought about what Ro's face had looked like. Not angry, not afraid. Patient, like a man who already knew the answer to a question no one had thought to ask yet. Tyrell had been a diplomat for 60 years. He had learned to read rooms, species, and silences. He walked slowly to the window at the far edge of the forum and looked out at the star field beyond the glass. He was not sure why, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a small and unfamiliar thing settle in his chest. It felt like unease. There was a star called Veth 9 that no one visited. It was not dangerous. It was not forbidden. It simply had nothing, no planets worth settling, no minerals worth mining, no moons with interesting geology. The Compact's survey teams had passed through it twice in 400 years and written the same word in their reports both times. Empty. That was why the humans had chosen it. 40 light minutes from Verath Prime, in the deep quiet between Veth 9's outer dust rings, a ship sat in absolute darkness. No running lights, no beacon pulse, no heat trace bleeding into the cold of space. If you aimed the Compact's best long-range sensor array directly at the spot where it floated, the readout would show you nothing but vacuum. The ship was called the Pale Ghost. Dr. Fenn had not slept in 31 hours. This was not unusual for her. She walked the ship's inner corridors the way other people walked familiar streets, without looking, without thinking about it, her fingers trailing along the wall panels out of habit rather than need. She was short, sharp-eyed, and wore her hair pulled back so tight it looked painted on. She had spent 11 years building this ship, and she still found reasons every day to walk its full length. Behind her, a young technician named Sable was struggling to keep up and take notes at the same time. "Hull layer," Fenn said, not turning around. "Quantum scatter mesh," Sable said, reading from her pad. "What does it do?" "It absorbs incoming sensor pings, delays them, redirects the return signal so it never reaches the source." "It does more than that." Fenn stopped at a wall panel and pressed her palm flat against it. "It reads the frequency of the ping first. It identifies the sensor type. Then it sends back a tailored response, not silence, not noise, but the exact signature of empty space. The sensor on the other end doesn't get confused. It gets lied to. There's a difference." Sable wrote that down. They kept walking. "Drive system," Fenn said. "Zero exhaust cycle drive. All energy is captured, stored, and recycled internally. No heat vented to space." "And why does that matter?" "Because heat is the easiest thing to track in space. Warships run hot. Even the best shielded drives leave a thermal trail. The Ghost doesn't." "The Ghost doesn't," Fenn agreed. She said it the way someone agrees with a statement about the weather, plainly, without pride, because it was simply true. They reached the engine room. It was quieter than any engine room had a right to be. The drive core glowed a dim, deep blue, and the only sound was a low hum that you felt more in your teeth than your ears. Fenn looked at it for a long moment. Every other species in the Compact looked at the problem of space warfare and asked how to hit harder, she said. Bigger weapons, faster ships, shields that could take more punishment. They built loud because they believed that power meant being seen, being heard. She paused. "We asked a different question." Sable waited. "We asked what wins a fight that never starts, what ends a war before the first shot, what scares something that cannot be frightened by anything it can measure." Fenn turned away from the engine core. "They laughed at our ships for 20 years. We kept building." They walked back through the ship, past the crew quarters where 40 people lived under strict emission protocols. No unshielded electronics, no open-band communication, temperature regulation suits that kept body heat contained to within half a degree of ambient. Past the sensor room where 2 operators monitored the Compact's fleet activity from a completely passive array that sent out nothing, absorbed everything. Past the briefing bay where the mission plan was already loaded on the table, waiting. Rowe was there. He had arrived an hour ago on a small shuttle that had docked through the ventral bay, a dock designed to seal so completely that not even a breath of pressurized air escaped during transfer. He was sitting at the briefing table with a cup of water he had not touched, reading through the final system reports. He looked up when Fen came in. "All green?" he asked. "All green," she said. "She's ready." He nodded and looked back at the report. 14 drones are in position, transponders broadcasting clean human ship signatures. The compact will see exactly what they expect to see. And us. We will be exactly where they don't expect us to be. He set the report down. 12 hours. Fen sat across from him. For a moment neither of them spoke. The ship hummed around them so quietly it was almost like silence. "Do you think Soval will understand what he's seeing?" she asked. "In the moment, I mean, when it happens." Rowe thought about it. "No," he said, "not in the moment. In the moment he will only understand that something has gone very wrong for him." He picked up his water. "The understanding comes after. That's the part that stays." Fen looked at the wall. Outside that wall was space. Inside the space was darkness. Inside the darkness, invisible to every instrument the galaxy had ever built, the pale ghost waited with the patience of something that had been underestimated for a very long time and had never once forgotten it. 12 hours. The compact had added conditions. This was expected. Rowe had read the amendment requests the night before they arrived, because he had spent 20 years learning how the compact thought, and they always moved in the same direction when they smelled weakness, toward it, and fast. Fleet Commander Aurak had submitted a formal request to expand the wargame's spectator safety perimeter. The new perimeter required 6 additional Gren warships. Then came a secondary request, 2 Vithrani observation cruisers for sensor calibration. Then a Lushan monitoring vessel. Then a compact security detail of 4 ships. By the time the final roster was confirmed, 23 alien warships would be present in the Verath engagement zone for a demonstration involving 14 human ships. Rowe approved every condition, without a single objection. This confused the compact's coordination office enough that they sent a follow-up message asking if he had read the full addendum. He replied that he had, and that humanity welcomed the expanded audience. On the day itself, the Verath system was busier than it had been in a decade. Ships arrived through the jump corridor in groups and took up their assigned observation positions around the wide, flat engagement zone. Aurak's flagship, a Gren battle cruiser called the Dominant Voice, anchored the center of the arc. It was 400 meters long, heavily armed, and bristling with sensor arrays that could track a coin tumbling through space at 10,000 kilometers. The other 22 ships spread out around it in a loose crescent. Their combined firepower could have ended a small war in an afternoon. At the Forum station above Verath Prime, High Arbiter Soval watched through the command feed. Tyrell stood near the back of the room, arms folded, and said nothing. Then, on schedule, the 14 human ships arrived. They came through the jump corridor one at a time and moved into the engagement zone at standard cruise speed. Their signatures were exactly as registered, same mass, same drive output, same dull gray hull shapes the Forum hologram had shown. They formed a loose formation and held it. Nothing about them was impressive. Nothing about them was surprising. Aurak looked at his tactical screen and felt something he recognized as contempt. "Confirm human fleet readiness," his comms officer said over the open channel. "Human fleet confirms readiness," came the reply. The voice was calm, flat, professional. "Countdown to engagement start, 10 minutes. Aurak leaned back in his chair. He had already decided how this would go. The wargame rules allowed full-spectrum sensor locks and simulated weapon solutions. Within 2 minutes of the start signal, he would have targeting locks on every human ship. He would hold them there for the full exercise period and let the Forum watch. The point was not to defeat the humans. The point was to show the Forum exactly how fast and how completely they could be defeated. The rest would follow naturally. The maps were already drawn. At T-4 minutes, one of the human ships reported a minor navigation fault and requested a brief hold. Then a second. Then 3 more. The 14 ships drifted slightly, small adjustments, nothing dramatic. The kind of thing that happened with older drives in a new gravity environment. Aurak's sensor officer ran a routine recalibration. The returns were clean. All 14 human ships still present, still readable, still exactly where they were supposed to be. T-2 minutes. Something happened to the sensor arrays. It was not a failure. It was subtler than that. The returns started flickering brief ghost signals, false contacts appearing and disappearing at the edge of resolution. The sensor officer frowned and ran a diagnostic. The diagnostic returned clean. The ghosts kept coming. "What is that?" Aurak said. "Unknown, sir. Possible interference from the jump corridor residue." "Eliminate it." "Working on it." T-30 seconds. The sensor officer looked up from his board. His voice was careful in the way a person's voice gets careful when they are not sure if what they are seeing is real. "Sir, I'm getting scatter returns across the whole zone." "From what?" "I don't know." T-10 seconds. Aurak sat forward. "Full active scan, all arrays now." The dominant voice lit up every sensor system it carried: electromagnetic, graviton, thermal, mass displacement. The scan went out across the engagement zone like a wave and came back in a fraction of a second. Clean, empty, nothing unusual. T0. The countdown completed. The engagement began. And the 14 human ships were gone. Not damaged, not destroyed, not retreated through the jump corridor, just gone. One moment they were on every screen, and the next the screens showed empty space where they had been. No drive flare, no jump signature, no heat bloom, nothing. For 4 full seconds, no one on the dominant voice said a word. Then Aurak's tactical officer spoke in a very quiet voice. "Sir, I have no contacts. The engagement zone is empty." Aurak stared at the screen. Around him, across 22 other ships, the same silence was happening. Sensor officers looking at clean readouts, tactical officers finding nothing, commanders leaning forward in their chairs the way people lean forward when they are certain they must be reading something wrong. At the Forum station, Soval's hand had stopped moving over his data pad. Tyrell had unfolded his arms. The engagement zone held nothing but stars, and the combined sensor wash of 23 warships finding absolutely no one. Ro's voice had not come over the channel yet. It would, but not yet. For now there was only the silence, and the slow, spreading understanding that something had gone wrong, not with the sensors, not with the equipment, but with every assumption the compact had walked into this system carrying. The maps, Tyrell thought, might need to be redrawn. Aurak sent his sensor officer to run a physical diagnostic on the array hardware. It was not a rational decision. The arrays were built into the hull. Running a physical diagnostic meant sending a technician into a crawl shaft with a handheld scanner, which would take 20 minutes, and tell him nothing the software had not already confirmed twice. But Aurak needed something to do, and ordering a diagnostic felt like action, and right now action felt better than sitting in his chair staring at an empty tactical screen where 14 ships used to be. The other commanders were on open channel now, talking over each other. "Compact security lead to all vessels. Confirm your sensor status." Thrani observation 1 confirms full array function. No contacts. Gren support 3 confirms. Zone is clear. Lushan monitor confirms. We have nothing. 23 ships. Every sensor type the galaxy had developed across 3,000 years of combined technological history. All of them pointed at the same patch of space, all of them reading the same answer. Empty. Aurak pulled up the last recorded positions of the human ships and stared at them. 14 contact points, frozen at the moment they had vanished, scattered across a 200-kilometer area of open space. He traced the geometry of it with his finger on the screen. No clustering near the jump corridor. No movement toward any exit vector in the seconds before they disappeared. They had simply stopped being detectable. Could they have jumped? His navigation officer asked. There was no jump signature, the sensor officer said from across the bridge. No graviton spike, no corridor bloom. You cannot enter jump without a signature. It is physically impossible. Then where are they? No one answered. At the forum station, the command feed had gone very quiet. The usual background noise of a monitoring session, the tapping of data pads, the murmured side conversations, the soft sounds of 20 analysts doing their jobs had stopped. Everyone was watching the same readouts. Everyone was seeing the same nothing. Soval had not moved in 3 minutes. Tyrell stood at the back of the room with his hands clasped behind him and looked at the central display. He was thinking about the way Rowe had walked out of the forum 2 weeks ago, the straightness of it, the absence of hurry. He thought they are still in the zone. He thought they were never gone. Then the voice came. It arrived on the open fleet channel without a hailing request, without a priority code, without any of the standard compact communication protocols. It simply appeared, calm and clear, in every translation ring on every ship in the Verath system. Fleet Commander Aurak. Aurak went very still. This is Admiral Rowe of the United Earth Sovereignty. I am transmitting from a position 14 meters off your port bow. I want to be precise about that distance because I want you to understand how long I have been here. On the Dominant Voices bridge, every head turned to the portside display. The sensor readout showed nothing. 14 meters of empty space. Your vessel has been marked, targeted, and would have been destroyed by this ship 6 times in the last 8 minutes. Your flag bridge specifically has been inside a weapons solution since 4 minutes before the engagement countdown reached 0. We were in position before you completed your formation. Tyrell closed his eyes briefly. He had been right. I am now going to ask my crew to make us visible. I want to be courteous about this, so I am telling you first. A pause, 2 seconds, 3. And then the pale ghost appeared. It did not decloak with drama. There was no flash, no shimmer, no cinematic wave of light peeling back from a hidden shape. One moment the space beside the dominant voice was empty. The next, a ship was there, long, dark, angular, with a hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was close enough that Aurak could see the individual panels of the quantum scatter mesh if he looked at the visual feed. Then, across the engagement zone, 14 more ships became visible. They appeared throughout the system simultaneously, not in a cluster, not near the jump corridor, but spread across the full operational area, each one positioned beside a different compact vessel. One alongside the Vithrani observation cruiser, one above the Lushan monitor, one sitting directly behind the compact security lead ship, close enough to be in docking range. Every single alien commander in the Verath system looked at their displays and found a human ship sitting next to them that had been there, undetected, the entire time. The open channel was silent for a long time. When Soval finally spoke, his voice had lost the particular quality it usually carried, the weight of 4,000 years of institutional authority, the certainty of a species that had never been surprised by anything it could not eventually explain. How long, he said slowly, have you had this technology? Rowe's answer came back without hesitation. Long enough, he said. Another silence, longer this time. Orak was looking at the visual feed showing the pale ghost beside his ship. His tactical officer had finally gotten a full sensor return on it. Now that the ship had chosen to be visible, it cooperated with the scans. The readings came back and the tactical officer read them and looked up at Orak with an expression that was difficult to describe. "Sir," he said, "their weapons were hot the whole time. They were fully armed during the entire approach and holding period. We never knew." Orak said nothing. He looked at the ship on his screen. Dark and quiet, patient. 14 meters away, and it had been there for nearly 10 minutes before he had known it existed. He thought about the 23 warships he had assembled, the expanded perimeter, the sensor calibration vessels, the full-spectrum active scans. All of it, and they had seen nothing. The emergency session was called for the following morning, but half the delegations arrived that night. They came without their usual formality, no ceremonial entry order, no staged seating arrangement, no quiet political maneuvering in the corridors before the doors opened. The Vithrani senior delegate arrived 20 minutes early and sat down without speaking to anyone. The Gren block came in a group of 5 and took their places at the far end of the table with the careful movements of people who were still deciding how to hold their faces. The smaller species, the ones who had laughed the loudest during the first session, found their seats and became very interested in their data pads. No one mocked the human delegation's chairs. Rowe arrived last on time with Tyrell walking beside him. They had spoken briefly in the corridor outside. Tyrell had said only one thing worth noting. "Whatever you do in there, do not be gracious about it. Graciousness now will look like weakness later. Let them come to you." Rowe had nodded and said nothing. The session opened without ceremony. Sovol did not deliver a prepared statement. He looked at the room and then looked at Rowe and said, in the plain, unadorned voice of a person setting down something heavy, "We would like to understand what we witnessed yesterday." Rowe said, "I am happy to explain the general principles. The specifics are not available for discussion." "You mean the technology itself?" "I mean everything about the technology itself. Its construction, its components, its limitations, its range of application. None of that is on the table." A Gren delegate, not Orak, who had not come at all, said, "You expect us to accept a military asset we cannot verify or understand." "You verified it yesterday," Rowe said, "in the most direct way possible. 15 ships were beside 15 of your vessels without your knowledge for an average of 9 minutes before they became visible. Verification happened. Understanding is a separate matter." The Gren delegate had no immediate answer to that. Fenn was brought in an hour into the session. It had been Sovol's request, phrased carefully as an invitation to the technical lead. She came in with a cup of cold coffee she had been carrying since the shuttle and sat down at the side table without putting it down. The Vithrani science delegate asked her, with genuine curiosity, how the drive system achieved zero thermal output. "It doesn't achieve zero output," Fenn said. "It achieves zero venting. The thermal energy is real. We capture it, cycle it back into secondary systems, store the excess in thermal buffer cells, and release it in controlled bursts during periods of active maneuvering when there is already enough drive noise to mask the bloom. The ship is not cold. It just never shows you that it's warm." The science delegate wrote something down, then looked up. "Could you share the buffer cell specifications?" "No," Fenn said. "The cycling system architecture?" "No." "The mesh composition?" "No." The delegate considered this. "Is there anything you are willing to share?" Fenn looked at her cup. "I can tell you that it works," she said. "You already know that." Near the end of the session, a Vithrani junior delegate asked the question that several others had clearly been working up to. "How many ships of this type does humanity currently operate?" Fenn looked at Rowe. Rowe did not look back at her. He was looking at the table with an expression of mild thoughtfulness. "I'm not authorized to answer that question," Finn said. Which was, as every delegate in the room understood, a very specific kind of answer. The motion to strip humanity's border systems was formally withdrawn before the session closed. The vote was unanimous, and it was the fastest unanimous vote in the compact's recent history. No one asked for a discussion period. No one requested a procedural review. The vote happened, and then everyone moved very quickly to the next item on the agenda, as if they were all eager to be doing something other than sitting in a room with the consequences of their previous behavior. Rowe stayed after. He sat in the emptying forum while the staff began to reset the room for the following day's session, and he waited until Sovol came to him. The High Arbiter moved differently than he had 2 weeks ago, not smaller exactly, but less certain in the way he took up space. He sat across from Rowe and looked at him for a moment before speaking. "You could have disclosed this at any point in the last decade," Sovol said. "You let this body treat your species as a minor concern. You allowed the territorial review to proceed. You allowed the mockery." A pause. "Why?" Rowe looked at him calmly. "Because showing you a ship is one thing," he said. "Showing you what you are willing to do when you believe no one is watching, that is something else, something more useful." Sovol was quiet for a moment. "What does humanity want from the compact?" he finally asked. Rowe answered without hesitation. "A seat at the table that is not at the end of it," he said. "Territorial integrity respected without review. And from this point forward, when a human delegate speaks in this forum, the translation rings work both ways." He paused. "We can hear the commentary at our end of the table. We always could." Sovol's expression shifted in a way that was hard to read. "That will be arranged," he said quietly. Rowe stood up and picked up his document case. "Good session," he said and walked out. 3 months after the Verath demonstration, a new seat appeared at the Compact's Security Council table. It was not at the end. The restructuring had taken 11 days of closed sessions, 4 procedural challenges from the Gren bloc, 2 amended treaty clauses, and 1 moment where a Vithrani administrator had told a Gren delegate to consider the current tactical landscape carefully before continuing that objection. The Gren delegate had considered it and withdrawn the objection. Humanity now held the 3rd seat on the Security Council. The territorial review framework had been quietly suspended pending a full revision. 3 compact members had made private inquiries about joint research programs with human engineering teams. All 3 had received the same polite, non-committal response, and a follow-up note suggesting they contact the Earth Sovereignty's diplomatic office to discuss scheduling. The note did not mention that the scheduling office had a 6-month waiting list. Lieutenant Asha was not at the forum for any of this. She was aboard a ship, doing what she had been doing for the past 9 weeks, running dark, running quiet, running invisible through a star corridor that the compact used for freight transfers between its inner systems. She had been promoted 10 days after Verath. The promotion came through standard channels with no ceremony attached, which suited her fine. She had not joined the program for ceremony. She kept a personal log, not a formal record. Those were maintained by the ship's systems automatically. This was something she wrote in a small notebook with a physical pen, because physical pens were not electronic and did not emit anything, and old habits from the program's early days died hard. She wrote, "The galaxy did not change because it wanted to. It changed because the math changed and it had no choice." That sounds cynical. I do not mean it cynically. It is just true. You cannot shame a civilization into treating you differently. You cannot ask loudly enough. You can only change what they are calculating when they look at you. We changed the calculation. Everything after that followed like water going downhill. She closed the notebook and looked through the forward viewport at the star corridor outside. Somewhere in that corridor, 2 compact freight haulers were moving between systems. Their transponders showed clearly on passive scan. probably 3-4 kilometers away from the nearest one right now. The freight hauler's sensors showed nothing nearby but empty space. She smiled and went back to her station. Fenn was not on the ship. Fenn had never really left the lab. In the weeks after Verath, she had given 2 briefings, attended 4 hours of compact sessions when her presence was specifically required, and spent the rest of her time in the Earth Sovereignty's deep engineering facility at Ganymede Station, working on something she had not described in detail to anyone who asked. Rowe had asked once, in a corridor near the facility's main entrance. Fenn had said, "The ghost was the proof that the concept worked. Now I want to know how small we can make it work." Rowe had thought about that for a moment. "How small?" he asked. "Drone scale," she said, "maybe smaller." She had gone back inside before he could respond. He had stood in the corridor for a few seconds, thinking about a sensor array the size of a fist that returned empty space, thinking about a swarm of them, thinking about what a fleet would look like if the ships were not the invisible part, if the invisible part was something else entirely, something smaller and more patient, and distributed across a volume of space so large that no scan could ever be sure it was clean. He had not shared this thought with anyone. At the Compact Forum, Tyrell was finishing his annual report to the Lushan government. The report was careful, factual, and professionally written. In the section covering the Verath incident and its aftermath, he had used measured diplomatic language to describe what had occurred and what it meant for the Compact's strategic balance going forward. The last paragraph of the section had taken him 4 days to write. He had rewritten it 11 times. The final version read, "The demonstrated capability of the human stealth program represents a fundamental shift in our understanding of this species' military capacity. What remains unknown is the full extent of that capacity, and this uncertainty should be understood as a permanent feature of the Compact's strategic environment rather than a temporary gap to be filled. We do not know how many such vessels exist. We do not know where they are. We do not know what human engineers are currently building." He submitted the report and then went to the observation deck on the station's outer ring, where the viewport faced away from Verath Prime and into open space. His aide found him there an hour later. "Ambassador, the next session starts in 20 minutes. "I know," Tyrell said. He did not turn from the window. The aide waited for a moment. Tyrell was looking at the star field with the focused, slightly distant expression of someone working through a problem they had not yet solved. "What are you looking at?" the aide asked. "Nothing," Tyrell said. "Stars." A pause. "I have been thinking," he said more quietly. "If a human ship can stand beside you and you cannot see it, we know that is true because we all watched it happen. But here is the thing I keep returning to." He paused. "How many have already passed through this system? How many times in the last 10 years has a human vessel been in this corridor, in this station's approach lane at this exact viewport's distance, and we simply never knew? How many are out there right now, watching everything we do and say and plan?" The aide said nothing. The stars held their light without comment. "We assumed we knew the shape of humanity," Tyrell said. "We assumed we had measured it. We had measured what they showed us, and we mistook that for everything." He finally turned from the window. His face was calm, but his eyes had the look of a person standing at the edge of a much larger drop than they had expected. "That is the part I cannot stop thinking about." He straightened his jacket and walked back toward the corridor. The stars outside the viewport stayed where they were, fixed, ancient, indifferent, and whatever else was out there among them, patient and dark and invisible, did not make a sound.